we'll talk about Huck saves the life of Widow Douglas. This is an extract that had been taken from The Adventure of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Huckleberry Finn, or Huck as he is called in the novel, is an orphan and a friend of Tom Sawyer. One night, Huck spots two men acting suspiciously and follows them, thinking they are on their way to hide a treasure. So let us proceed to find out more what are the things happened and taken place in the story of this short extract that is taken from the adventures of Tom Sawyer, written by Mark Twain. Mark Twain, pen name of Samuel Langhorne Clemens, was born on November 30th, 1835, Florida, Missouri, U.S. Died on April 21st, 1910, Reading, Connecticut. He was an American humorist, journalist, lecturer, and novelist who acquired international fame for his travel narratives, especially The Innocents, The Innocents Abroad, that was published in 1869, Roughing It 1872, and Life on the Mississippi 1883, and for his adventure stories of boyhood, especially The Adventures of Tom Sawyer 1876 and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn 1885. He was gaining their popularity in the world. A gifted narrator, distinctive humorist, irascible moralist, he transcended the apparent limitations of his origins to become a popular public figure in the United States and one of America's best and most beloved writers. How he looks, Mark Twain, the image of Mark Twain, the happening taken one night. That night, Huck was hiding in that side street behind the inn. What you see here as the story started, we find that Huck was already hiding in that side street behind the inn. At 11 o'clock, all the lights in the inn went out. Everybody's asleep now, thought Huck. He saw the time was 11 o'clock. It was about to midnight, and he found that now almost everybody was fallen asleep as the lights was switching off. I should sleep too. He was speaking to himself that he should sleep too. At that moment, he heard a faint sound from the inn. Suddenly, he heard some sound was coming from the inn. Somebody had closed a door softly and was coming very quietly down the street. So he heard that somebody had gently or slowly closed the door and was coming very slowly down the street. Huck quietly returned to his hiding place. So he again went to his hiding place. The two men passed by. He had seen the two men were passing by on the street. One of them were one of them was carrying a heavy box. That's the treasure, Huck thought. He thought to himself that that man who was carrying a heavy box was a treasure. They're taking it away. That means he thought that from the inn the man had stolen the treasure. They're going to hide it somewhere. They're going to hide it somewhere else. It was thought by Huck. I'll have to follow them. He encouraged himself and said that he had to follow them. There's no time to tell Tom, the best friend of Huckleberry Finn, who is also known in the story as Huck. So he is speaking to himself, encouraging himself that I have to grow forward without informing Tom, otherwise, it will be very late. I'll have to follow them myself. So he encouraged himself and he started following the two men. The two men walked for a while beside the river. He observed that the two men had walked for some time beside the river. Then they turned and walked up the hill, and after a while, from beside the river, they changed their direction towards the hill. Huck followed them all the way, and he was quietly following them almost every time. It was a moonless night, and that helped. It was a moonless night, and that helped Huck. So the narrator is telling that it was the full moon night and everything was quite visible, so he can see and easily follow them. The men came to Widow Douglas' house. He saw that the men finally reached to the Widow Douglas' house. Then the question arises why those two men had came to this particular house. What is the reason behind? Let us find out. They stopped, and Huck also had stopped behind them. He was quite near the men and could hear every word they spoke. So he was so near to them that he can hear clearly what they were discussing. There are lights in 3 rooms. Somebody must be there with her, Red Joe said angrily. So he heard that one of them, whose name was Red Joe, was telling that in 3 rooms light was switched on. So there must be somebody with her. So it is not right time to enter that house. And why this Red Joe he wanted to enter in this widow's Douglas house? There might be some reason, right? So let us see. You can't do anything tonight, the other man said. So his partner said that, so let us drop out today's idea of entering this widow's Douglas house and we'll come next day. We cannot do anything tonight. They have no chance to enter inside the house. Why? Because the light was still on. Come on, let's go. Leave her alone. Forget it. So the other man was trying to make Red Joe understand. Let us move today. Leave this idea, whatever you have planned, and forget it for today. We'll see next day. Forget it, exclaimed Red Joe. Forget it, exclaimed Red Joe. Never. I'll never forget it. Her husband sent me to prison. So finally, now one of the reason we know that this person wanted to enter in the house of widow Douglas was that her husband had sent him to jail. When I came out, now he is released from the jail. I came here to kill him. So he had came here to kill her husband, but he died before. But it was his bad luck that her husband had already expired before I got here. It doesn't matter. She'll have to pay instead of him. But this man, Red Joe, was not giving up. That though I was not able to kill her husband, but the lady has to pay for it. That means he want to kill the widow Douglas. I'm going to kill her tonight. So this was the plan of Red Joe and his partner. Tonight they are going to kill her. There's somebody there. Red Joe was not listening. He turned to his companion. See how aggressive this person is. He turned against his companion, his friend. You got to help me. If you don't, I'll kill you too. He threatened his companion also. If you don't help me, I'm going to kill you too. Here, hurry up then. What are you waiting for? The other man said. Then let's go. What are we waiting for? Let's go in and kill her. I'm waiting till the lights go out. See, Red Joe was waiting till the light will be switched off. The two men were silent now. Both of them were quiet, waiting for the lights to go out. They stood there waiting for the lights to go out, and all this conversation was heard by whom? Yes, right, by Huck. He was following and listening all the conversation clearly. Huck was very frightened by hearing all this discussion. He was very frightened. He crept away very quietly. He moved slowly backward very quietly. Then he began to run. He began to run towards his own house. He ran fast till he came to a house. On the way, he came to a house. This was the house of Mr. Jones, a brave and honest old man. So he first reached to the house of Mr. Jones, who was honest and brave old man. There Huck stopped. So he stopped on this man's house. And here we can see in the picture from behind, Huck was seeing from behind these two men clearly, and this is the house of Lady Douglas. So when he had stopped at the house of Mr. Jones, he knocked at the door. Let me in, please, please let me in, he cried. He was in frightened, knocking at the door and speaking for allow him to get inside the house at night time. Just imagine, it was more than 11 now, maybe midnight, 12 o'clock, because the scene had already taken at 11. So he was in frightened, asking, knocking to let him in the door of Mr. Jones. What's the matter? The old man called from his bedroom window. So he was asleep. Mr. John was asleep, and from his bedroom window he was looking at the boy outside and saying, what's the matter? Then he came downstairs with his two strong sons. Mr. Jones was having two strong sons. All the three stood there in the doorway. All the three stood there in the doorway. Why, it's Huckleberry Finn, the old man said. Please let me in. Huck begged. Something terrible is going to happen. As he was standing outside of the door, he was telling about the terrible thing that was about to happen tonight, that night. Come in and tell us. Now the door was opened and he get inside the house and telling, okay, come inside the house and tell us. Huck went inside and told his story. 2 minutes later, Mr. Jones and his son were running towards Widow Douglas' house. After hearing the story, what Huck had narrated to them, they went running towards Widow Douglas' house. Each of them were carrying a gun. Huck did not go with them. So why Huck had not followed them? Because he was totally frightened, and the reason might be that he was not able, he was not strong enough, he don't have the weapon, and he was in the state of frightened. So he was not having now courage to follow them. Before he was having, but now he is in dilemma, how or what to be done. So he's now totally confused. The fear increased so much that he was not able to encourage himself to take the better step and follow them. He hid himself. Instead, what he did, he hid himself and waited. Suddenly, he heard a shot. He heard a shot. They were shooting. Hawk jumped up from his hiding place. where he was hiding. From there he jumped up, came out. He ran away as fast as he could. Can you guess where he was running? He was running towards his own place. Very early the next morning, okay, when he came very early next morning, Huck was again knocking at Mr. Jones's door. Come in, my boy, come in. Mr. Jones welcomed the boy very lovingly. The old man said very kindly, "You're a brave fellow, Huck." He appreciated. "Huck, you'll always be welcome here. So from now onwards, you are always welcome to my house. Come in and have some breakfast with us." He offered, since it was morning time, so he had offered some breakfast to him to eat. Huck sat down at the table, but he could not eat anything. He had taken his place, but the breakfast that Mr. Jones had served him, he was not able to eat. Why? Because he was still having the fear what had happened that night, whether the two men were caught or killed, or Lady Douglas was killed, or what happened to his two sons. These were the thoughts that was surrounding him. So he was still in the state of frightened fear. "You look ill, Huck. You look ill, Huck," said Mr. Jones. Seeing his appearance, Mr. Jones had said that you are looking, drink this cup of tea. Then the old man told Huck what had happened the previous night. So after that, he comforted the boy and told him, "You have this tea and I will tell you what had happened last night. We weren't able to catch them, so the two strong sun and himself, they were not able to catch in the darkness of the full moon. Might they had escaped very fast, hearing the people were coming from behind, so they weren't able to catch them. Red Joe and his partner had escaped that night," he said. "But one of them was wounded. But the gunfire, the gunshot that you heard last night had wounded one of them. He can't be far away." So Mr. Jones was telling that wounded of both of them can't be far away. They cannot go away from nearby area. "We've told the men in the village, and this thing he had informed to the whole village. They're going to search the woods for those criminals." So those two men were the criminals, Red Joe and his partner. And now one of them who was wounded, we don't know, because this is an extract, whether Red Joe is injured or his partner, but one of them was wounded. And all the village now, they are going to search and find out about these two criminals in the forest. "Can you tell me what they looked like?" So he is asking, "Can you tell me how they appear? What is the facial appearance of those two men? Have you seen them?" "Well," said Huck slowly, he said, "well, one of them is that Spaniard." That means like Spanish he was looking. "You've seen him about the village, and you also had seen him, and you also had seen him in the village. He has got long white hair and he's dumb." He's trying to make Mr. Jones that his appearance and complexion is like this, which you have also seen him. "The other fellow is a stranger. He's tall and thin and he's wearing old clothes." So he had described them as he had seen them. "I know them both," Mr. Jones said. By hearing this, he said, "Yes, I know both of them. I can identify it." Then he asked, "What made you follow them?" Then Mr. Jones asked from Huck, "Then what made you follow that previous night?" "Well, I couldn't sleep. I went out for a walk." So he was just going for a walk. night walk might. I saw them too, and I found these two men. One of them was carrying a heavy box. He stolen something, I thought. So Huck told that just walking and happened to see, and one of them was carrying a heavy box, and he had thought something they had stolen as the box. I'll follow him. So he made or encouraged himself to follow them. They went towards the river, turned right, and went up the path that leads to Widow Douglas. I was close behind them all the time. I could hear almost every word. When they reached Widow Douglas stopped. They began talking. So he started to speak again to Mr. Jones. But isn't that dumb? But isn't that dumb? Asked Mr. Jones. Oh, no, he isn't. He's. Huck suddenly stopped. That means, no, 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 what you are thinking? No, no, he's not dumb at all. But that means he is not able to speak or to take his, as he was criminal. He was telling the old man too much. He did not want, so he don't want to tell the name of who the person was. Don't want to get himself. Who is he? The old man asked. Okay, but the old man kept on asking him who was. Tell me, my boy, afraid. We're your friends, and you can trust us. He spoke so kindly that Huck answered, he's Red Joe. Red Joe? The old man nearly jumped off his chair in his excitement. See, hearing the name of that criminal, Red Joe, he was about out from the chair. The fear was there with the people. Joe, he repeated. He couldn't believe his ears. Yes, that was Red. So the boy finally had said or spoken the name of that person who was the criminal about Red Joe. Still the old man was not believing. He was continuing asking again and again, are you sure it was the Red Joe? Yes, I recognized his voice. So Huck said yes, definitely he was the Red Joe whose voice he can identify clearly. Well, the old man could find no words to say. Now the old man, after listening this, he had no word to speak further what he thought. His sons had stopped eating. See how panicked they were now. His sons had stopped eating. They were looking at Huck with their mouths wide open. Their eyes were as big and round as saucers. They were completely still. They couldn't believe that this boy was following those criminals previous night. Ah, said the old man at last. Now I understand. Okay, now I understood. At that moment, Widow Douglas came in, and then at that moment only, Widow Douglas came into the house of Mr. Jones. She came to ask for news about the robbers. She wanted to know what had happened to them. Mr. Jones and his sons told her the story. So they had told the story to Lady Douglas. When they had finished, after telling the story, and when they had finished, Widow Douglas was trembling with fear and excitement. That means Widow Douglas was also not believing that those criminals had came last night. How can I thank you? She asked with tears in her eyes. You saved my life. She was very much frightened now and very much thankful to them that for saving her previous night. You mustn't thank me, the old man said. It wasn't me. It was. And he stopped. He didn't enclose the name of that boy, Huck. So he said, it was. He stopped. He wanted to say, it was Huck who saved you from Red Joe. But he had promised Huck to keep his name out of the story. So that's why he had not revealed the name of Huck to Lady Douglas. He did not want Huck to get into more trouble. So, till here the story ended, and this is how the Lady Douglas was saved. So, thank you